All right, welcome to the OB320 midterm one review. So I've been making these videos backwards, but it's likely that this is the first one you'll be watching. So um, if you want to watch video, the first part of the fourth video, that's where I go over things about what's on the exam and how Proctorio works. So if you want to real quickly watch that one before you watch this one, that might be a little bit of a help. Um, okay, so this is chapter one. This is called "What is Business Strategy?" So actually, well, I'll start here. First of all, business strategy is not equivalent to a goal. To say that we want to sell $50,000 in product this year, that's not a strategy, that's a goal. A strategy is what you're going to do to reach that goal. So if you think about business strategy, the book definition is a plan to achieve competitive advantage. And then it goes on, but that's what you need to know is it's a goal to, or it's a plan to achieve competitive advantage, not a goal. Um, so it's a plan to achieve competitive advantage. It's formulated by strategic leaders. Strategic leaders come up with the business strategy, and then they in turn implement that strategy. Um, there are different levels of the leaders, like there's executives and managers that are all the strategic leaders of a business strategy, but we'll get more to that later. For now, let's talk about how you come up with a business strategy. A business strategy answers kind of four questions. Um, it will also, we'll get to the questions later. It deals with the attractiveness of a market, how to offer unique value. I'm going to underline the important things in each of these. So on the first one, it's the market that's important. In the second one, it's the unique value that you're going to offer. And the third one, the resources and capabilities to deliver that unique value. Which resources and capabilities are you going to use? And then the fourth one, how are you going to sustain the competitive advantage should you gain that competitive advantage? Um, all right, so we'll start by, let me see. Okay, so let me say this before we go in depth a little bit into these things. The book mentions the strategic management process. Like this is how you develop your business strategy. It's through the strategic management process. So you do that by looking externally and internally, both external of your company and internal. In chapter 2 and 3, chapter 2 talks about external, and chapter 3 talks about internal. So we're not going to talk about that now. But what I will say is strategic management process, how you come up with a business strategy, is done by looking internally and externally of your company. What a business strategy does is answer the question form of these. Maybe I should have wrote the questions instead. So the first question is, which markets will the company pursue? So this is if you have a firm and your firm's going to do something, you haven't decided yet. The first question you should ask is, what do we want our firm to do? What are we going? Are we going to do soft drinks? Are we going to do technology? Are we going to do clothing? That's the first question. The second one is how to offer. Actually, doesn't want me to say anything else. Oh yeah, the market includes both the industry and the geographic location. So if you decide you want to do clothes, you then you also need to figure out where you'll want to sell it. So it could be online, but like where are you going to set up your office? Where are you going to set up your manufacturing plants? So the market includes the industry and the actual geographic location. Once you figure out what market you want to be in, you want to figure out what unique value relative to competitors. It's not enough just to offer a unique value. It has to be something that the competitors aren't doing. So that if you study business more, you'll talk more about how you don't want to base your whole company based on competitors, because that's not profitable. But at the same time, you can't just be doing what competitors are doing. People need a reason to switch products and to come to you. If you're just doing what other people are doing, you're not going to gain any market share. So anyway, so unique value is your value proposition. So in chapters 4 and 5 that hopefully you've already watched or you'll watch in a minute, there are 2 different ways you can offer value. You can do it through a cost advantage or through a differentiation strategy. So cost advantage, like I said, you'll learn more about this. Cost advantage is just saying we provide it for cheaper, we make it for cheap, we make it cheaper, we sell it cheaper, it's something along those lines. That it's about the cost. Chapter 5 is the differentiation strategy, and this is what you're probably more familiar with, or probably what you thought about when I said unique value. Your product or your service is different. It's better, or it's more attractive. There's something about the product or service itself that makes it more desirable. So those are the 2 ways that you would provide unique value. So once you figure out what market, you know what you want to offer. Now you need to figure out what resources and capabilities are you going to use to offer that. So resources would be things like factories, plants, not plants isn't like that you manufacture things in. People is a resource, like your employees. Also, just cash is a resource, being able to spend money on things. And then capabilities is things like formulas, processes, recipes, the way things work. So how are you going to use those things to deliver the unique value, your value proposition that you came up with in question 1? Okay, so jumping to the end, you've come up with a market. You've come up with what your unique value is. You figured out how you're going to do it. Now you need to figure out how to sustain a competitive advantage. That means to prevent people from imitating it. If you come up with a great idea, something really unique, and then you provide it, and it works, people start to buy your product, it's likely that other people are going to start doing it. I think in 1937, Packard Cars was the first one to install air conditioning. Figured out what market they wanted, had unique, no one had done it before, figured out how to manufacture it, and it was great. People loved it. People bought it. Now almost every car has air conditioning. So that wasn't. I'm sure they figured that would happen, but they didn't sustain a competitive advantage. All right. So anyway, let me back up. This is the strategic management process. The strategic management process helps you to come up with a plan for your business plan. This is how you do it, through the strategic management process. You answer these 4 questions, and that'll help you come up with your plan. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, well, good. So the question that the book poses is, what information and analysis guides strategy formulation? So the first one that the book mentions is a company's mission. A company's mission is a company's primary purpose. What are they there for? What are they trying to provide? Not the unique value that they're trying to provide, but is their mission to provide great clothes, or is it there to provide great or attractive pictures? I don't know. I'm making stuff up. So it's different from the unique value. The company's mission is their primary purpose for being a company. Another thing that companies use to help them come up with their business plan is called SWOT analysis. I draw this on the board in chapter 3. If you skip ahead to chapter 3, you'll see the board, and I talk a little bit about what SWOT analysis is. Real quick: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You look at a firm, you figure out what their strengths are that they can play to, the weaknesses that they need to try to downplay, the opportunities that they could take advantage of, and then the threats that they need to try to eliminate. You would use those things to try to come up with your business plan or your strategy. External analysis. So you would look at the industry. You would say, how is the industry doing? Sorry. Why are some industries more profitable than others? So you look at the industry as a whole and figure out whether or not the business plan is effective, what you could change about it. And then another aspect of that is customer analysis. Let me look at my notes here because I'm starting to lose my train of thought. Okay, customer analysis. You would look at the needs of the customer and then like if they're sensitive to prices. So you would look at those things, and that would help you figure out whether or not how to come up with your strategy plan. Real quick, something about SWOT analysis. When I draw it up in chapter 3, I mentioned that you don't need to know it. That's because I made these chapters backward, so I didn't realize that it talked about it in chapter 1. So when you get to chapter 3 and I say you don't need to know this, I'm lying in the future. I lied in the past, but you will notice that I lied in the future. So it would be good to have a good basic understanding of SWOT analysis. Don't overdo it, but you should be able to recognize what it is. Okay, so the reason these things affect your strategy formulation, it says it affects profitability, it affects customers' willingness to pay, and it affects what customers want. Okay, and then internally, those were external things. The SWOT analysis and customer analysis, segmenting your customers. Actually, let me back up to that because I didn't mention that. When you analyze your customers, you should segment them into, you could segment them a number of ways, but you could do it by age, you could do it by gender, you could do it by interests. We do talk about it more in a future chapter. I don't remember which one. But there are a number of different ways you could segment your customers. Oh, sorry. Okay, internally, when you figure out what your company's business plan is going to be, you can look at the strengths and weaknesses of your firm. You look at your core competencies. What are you good at? What is your firm best at? This goes back to the thing about right here. These two questions. What do you provide relative to a competitor? So let me back up. You want to provide your unique value. You don't want to look externally and just say, well, I'm going to do what that company's doing. Look internally, figure out what you can do to draw up your business plan or your business strategy. The other thing it mentions is the resource-based view of the firm. Oh, where did I write it down? Okay, so resource-based, sorry. This is like allocation of your resources. Where do you put things, and where will you put things according to your business plan? So that part was kind of confusing. You might want to look at the book to understand what I just did, because I think I kind of confused you a little bit. But now we'll talk about how strategies are formulated. Strategies are formulated on 3 planes. There's corporate strategy. And I'm going to start referring to my notes more because I confused myself when I didn't. So corporate strategy refers to what markets you want to be in. So this would be on the corporate level. This would be like headquarters, wherever headquarters is. This would be people figuring out what they want to provide, what market they want to be in. So you can think of this as corporate is where to compete. The next level down, the business unit. Wow. I'm sorry, that's not a B. The business unit strategy. So think about each like business you go to as their own unit. When you go to Subway, they have their own business unit strategy. Obviously, they talk to corporate. Corporate tells them, we want you to provide, if it's Subway, we want you to provide these sandwiches. We want to do a $5 footlong thing. But anyway, it's up to the business unit strategy to figure out how, is that the word that how to compete. So how to compete, how to take the corporate strategy and apply it to their own business. And then the last one being the functional strategy. So this is looking not at like the whole like the business unit. To try to break it down like that in your mind if that helps. The business unit. Don't think of it as the business unit strategy. Think of it as the business unit strategy. So when they come up with a business unit strategy, functional strategy would be, what is marketing going to do? What is sales going to do? What is research and development going to do? How are they going to take this strategy, which came from here, and apply it? How are they going to implement it? So corporate is where they're going to compete. The business unit strategy is how they're going to compete. And then functional strategy is what they're going to do to compete. So sometimes it can get kind of confusing. Think about where, how, and what when you think about these three. It'll help you lay it out in your mind. So the book mentioned strategy vehicles. These aren't critical to know. Just know that when you have a strategy, you come up with your business strategy, and then you're going to do something. You use strategy vehicles. So these are things like diversifying your company, acquiring like another company, forming a strategic alliance with other companies, or vertical integration, which refers to like the make or buy decision. So if you're in a company, it might be cheaper to make an aspect yourself, but it also might be cheaper to just buy it from someone else. So those are the four strategic vehicles: diversify, acquisition, strategic alliance, and vertical integration. Those are the like four strategy vehicles. Regardless, the important part is that once you have your business strategy, implementation. The book definition: the translation of a chosen strategy into an organization action. So obviously, any plan isn't good until you do something with it. So there are, let's see. So when you implement a strategy, there's the functional part that you implement. So this is like you take your strategy and then you implement the aspects of it. Like, we're going to start manufacturing this way. We're going to start telling customers this, and we're going to start selling this. Wait, let me try again. We're going to start selling this. We're going to start telling customers this. We're going to start manufacturing this way. That's the functional. And then the other thing that you start doing is the organizational structure. So this is things like culture. We're going to start being nicer to our customers. So think of functional like processes, what the plan says you're going to do, and then organizational structure. This is what you're going to be. That being said, there are two different strategies that come from implementing a strategy. There's the deliberate, and then there's the emergent. So deliberate is what you plan to do. The book gives the example of Target. Target realized that it was losing its market share to Walmart. It wasn't going to be able to compete. So their deliberate strategy was, well, rather than try to compete with Walmart, let's be a little more upscale. We'll be a little nicer, and then we won't have to try to wrestle customers with Target. We can start our own market. We can get our own market. That was their deliberate strategy. Emergent is what ends up happening over time. So if you think about Apple now, Apple Incorporated, Apple company, you think about like music, but when Apple first started, it was just computers. It was just another Microsoft. It was just a technology company. Over time, it's formed into like being about music, Apple Music, iPod and stuff. So over time, their strategy has emerged. Emergent strategy is more of their unintended strategy. So deliberate is what they decided they wanted to do and they did it. Emergent is what like ended up happening over time. And then the last thing that the chapter talks about is who benefits from good strategy. It lists 4 different kind of people who are invested in how well a company performs or how good their strategy is, and therefore how their company performs. These are called stakeholders. This is not the same thing as shareholders. Stakeholders are people who have a stake in the company. So let me jump down to the first one. The first one is capital. What do they call it? Capital market stakeholders. Stakeholders. This is shareholders. So these are the people that, if the company does well, we get money in our pocket. So they have a stake in how well the company is doing. They care. The next one would be a product market. This would be things like customers. So if you're a customer somewhere, you care about how they're doing because you're buying their product right then. If for some reason their business strategy is, we're going to start charging $7,500, $100,000 for every pair of shoes, then you care. You're a stakeholder in that company. You'll care. On the flip side, if they start saying we're going to start charging $3 for really good pairs of shoes, you care. The third one, organizational. Does it call that a market? No, they just call that organizational shareholders. This was shareholders too, by the way. Product market shareholders. Organizational shareholders. These are your employees. So these are people who maybe they're also stakeholders in the capital market sense. They care about if you make more money, I make more money. Organizational shareholders though is more employees, because if your business goes out of business, they don't have a job. That's more so what these kind of stakeholders care about. They care about the organization. And the fourth one is the community. So this is the community. Oh, let me say community shareholders. And then not just the community, but also things like like the government. They care about how your company is doing. There are a number of the community, especially like think about Detroit when the auto industry in Detroit started to collapse. The community of Detroit started to collapse, and then so the community cared. They had a stake in how the business strategy was, and then obviously the government would as well for a lot of the same reasons. So remember that these are the people who care about how a business strategy is. If it's a good strategy, these people are happy. If it's a bad strategy, these people are not happy. Okay, and then real quick, why do you need to know about business strategy? Simply because one day you'll be a part of one. When you get hired, you're going to join a company that has a business strategy, or maybe you'll start your own company and you're going to have a business strategy. You're going to have to figure these out yourselves. Maybe you join a company and you realize that they're not going to sustain a competitive advantage that could affect whether or not you accept employment there. So that's business strategy. Again, the chapter was called "What is a Business Strategy?" Answer these questions, you'll have your business strategy. Figure out what you want to do as a company and how you want to do it. So I guess a lot of you this is probably the first chapter you've watched. But this is the last one. Like I said, I made them all backwards. So this is the last one. So this is where I say good luck. Feel free to reach out to Sarah. Sarah was going to do this review and the one for the second chapter, but she hasn't been feeling well all week. So we apologize for getting all of them out late, but especially these chapter 1 and chapter 2. Feel free to reach out with any concerns, any questions before and after the midterm. Always feel like we are willing to help because we are. Don't be afraid. You can even reach out to Nick, your professor, if you want. Don't be afraid to do that. Again, look at the beginning of chapter 5 to get a little more information on the exam itself, what's on it, how it works. All right, good luck, and we will see you soon. All right, hello. This is the OB 320 midterm review. This is for chapter 2. This chapter is called Analysis of External Environment, Opportunities and Threats. So this has been kind of interesting. If you've been watching my videos as I've been posting them, then you've noticed I've been kind of working through this backwards. I did chapter 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, and then after I film this one, I'm going to film chapter 1 and post that as well. So it's been interesting working backwards, and if you've been watching the videos, you can see that too. So the last video I posted, chapter 3, was the internal environment. So this is the external. This is factors outside of your company that affect your company. It's interesting because I was going to reference the SWOT analysis that I drew up yesterday, but if you're watching the videos in order 1, 2, 3, you haven't seen the video that I made yesterday. But anyway. I'll explain it briefly, then when you get to chapter 3, you can see what I'm talking about, or it's in chapter 1. So SWOT analysis analyzes like the aspects of the company, both internal and external, and then whether or not those things are good or bad. If you want to see it written down, it's on page, just a second, 10 of the book. It's also in the next video if you just want to glance at that. Anyway, so SWOT, for the external environment, the parts of the SWOT analysis that apply are the strengths and weaknesses I'm sorry, that's for the internal. The ones that apply for the external environment are opportunities and threats. So opportunities are things, maybe potential markets you could move into, um, and then threats would be things like uh, companies you're competing against or companies that might start to steal some of your profit. Anyway, those are external things that affect your company. The chapter starts talking by a NAICS. It's how you determine. It's used to determine industry attractiveness. Um, that's really about all I know about it. Somehow it measures attractiveness and puts it on some percentage. So I mean that's not something you have to have a great understanding of. Um, yeah, it says it helps you understand the industry to avoid being blindsided by unseen competitors. So if you want something to remember what it is, that's a good sentence for you. Anyway, the things that you do need to know are the Porter's 5 forces. So real quick about chapter 2, there's a lot of little information. So there's a lot of topics and subtopics and subtopics. So I'm gonna draw this up and then keep referencing it. I'm not gonna write down everything I say. It is all in the book, but if I write down everything I say, this whole board is gonna be filled and then erased and filled. So I'm just gonna write down the things that outline the chapter. So Porter's 5 forces. Michael Porter is a strategy professor at Harvard that's very popular in the business world. So if you study business strategy or business much, you might read more of his things. So Porter's 5 forces are the 5 forces. Let's see, what's the sentence they use? Okay, maybe they don't have a good summarizing sentence. Anyway, I wrote down Porter's 5 forces measure the profit-making potential of an industry. So the first one, there are 5. The first one is competitive rivalry. So we're going to talk more in depth about each of them. The chapter lays them out and then goes more in depth. So the first one is competitive rivalry, and it's actually in the middle of the 5 forces because, I wanted to, real quick. There you go. Get rid of that glare for you. So it's actually in the middle because the other 4 forces both affect, all affect competitive rivalry. So at the top we have new entrants. Substitutes. Buyer power. I'm gonna write that further away. And then supplier power. So these are the 5 forces, external. So there'll be a part later in the chapter that lays out a few things. Don't get them confused. These are the things within your specific industry that affect your profit making or the profit making potential of an industry. Later we'll talk about things outside of your industry that affect it, but don't get those confused with it. This is within your industry. These are the things that affect profit making potential. So I'm not gonna write down much of what I say next because, like I said, there's gonna be a ton of it. And if you want to write it down, you can write little summaries, but there's a lot of it, and it's all in your book. So first of all, competitive rivalry. They list 7 different ways that competitive rivalry affect the profit-making potential. a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. If you have competitors, obviously it's going to affect your profit-making potential. So that being said, the first one is the number and the size of your competitors for obvious reasons. If you're going into an industry like, we'll say soft drinks, you're going to have to battle Coca-Cola. You're going to have to battle, I don't know, a bunch of big name ones. You'll also have to battle smaller ones, but regardless, you're going to be battling many huge companies and many small companies. So that is the number and size of competitors. The standardization of products. We'll talk about, actually, in chapter 1, it talked about, so if you're watching this backwards like I'm doing, we haven't gotten that far yet, but if you've watched chapter 1, I'm going to talk about how a company is successful only if it provides unique value. If it doesn't provide unique value, it's not going to sell anything. So standardization of products is, if you're in an industry where everything is pretty similar, it's much harder to get customers and to get customers or to get money. If you do something like, I'm trying to think, something like if you make laptops, your firm makes laptops, they're very different. Especially think between Microsoft and Apple. If you want if you use an Apple computer and you want to switch to Microsoft, it's a big change and it takes time to make that decision. But if it's little things like who you get your fruit from, like we'll say like canned fruit, it probably doesn't make much of a difference to you if it's Green Giant or if it's Great Value or companies like that. So anyway, the reason that that's important is because if your products are pretty standard across the board, it's hard to get customers. People need a reason to switch from Microsoft to Apple or Apple to Microsoft. They need a big reason. And if your products are all pretty standard, it's hard to convince consumers to move to you because the products are the same anywhere. So that took a little longer to explain. Just remember that standardized products, it's harder to gain a market share. Cost of buyers switching to another product. This is similar to that Microsoft example I was just mentioning. The book talks about, if the costs is more than just monetary costs. If you're switching from Apple to Microsoft, you not only have to buy that new laptop, but you have to switch all your files to the right form. You have to download iTunes again. So costs include monetary costs, but they also include time and effort, and we refer to those as opportunity costs, the other things that you have to give up. Okay, growth and demand for product. So this is another pretty self-explanatory one. If your business isn't growing, or if the demand for the firm or the industry isn't growing, it's going to be hard. It's going to affect how competitive the rivalry is if all the businesses seem to be struggling. Okay, and now this is where we get into the kind of weird ones you might not have thought about for competitive rivalry. The first one is high levels of unused production capacity. So in chapter 5, I draw up an economy of scale and explain what an economy of scale is and how companies, basically what it is that to minimize costs, it's effective to produce a lot. So you'll see the graph in chapter 5, but if you have a machine that costs $1,000, it's not worth it to just produce one thing with that machine because that one thing costs $1,000. However, if you buy a machine that costs $1,000 and you produce 2,000 things, each thing is cost 50 cents. So businesses want to produce at capacity to make the most of their machines, make the most of their expenses, and spread those expenses as little as possible. That being said, though, if you're in a business or a competitive situation where demand isn't very high, all the businesses are going to be wanting to produce at capacity, and it's possible they're going to overproduce by a lot. So now you have lots of product that you don't need, that you're going to have to sell at a discount, or you're going to have to hold on to it, and that's obviously a waste of money. Discounting it to sell it would also be a waste, but it would be less of a waste than holding on to it. You'd be losing less money to sell at a discount. That being said, this one, high levels of unused production capacity, ties right into the next one, which is high fixed costs, high perishable products, and high storage costs. For each of these, it's more expensive to hold on to it. So for high fixed costs, if you produce something and it costs a lot, actually they have a good example of this one. For high fixed costs, think about an airline. When Southwest flies a plane from Charlotte, North Carolina to St. Louis, they have to pay for gas, they have to pay for the plane itself, they have to pay for, each thing costs money. And the difference between getting you on that plane and you not being on that plane, the only difference is they'll lose $60. It doesn't cost them any more to get you on that plane. So obviously they want to fill every plane up so that they can get as much money as possible. And if a plane isn't very full, they'll discount their prices a lot, sell really cheap seats, and they'll lose a lot of money. But like we said before, losing a lot of money with a discount is better than not selling at all. Which ties into the next part of that, highly perishable products. If you're selling fruit, you can't hold on to that for very long before it goes bad. If you hold on to it, you've held on to it for a while and you want to get rid of it, you'll have to discount it to sell it. And then high storage costs, obviously, it costs a lot to hold on to it, so you'll want to discount it so you don't have to hold on to it. So all of those things affect competitive rivalry, because if there's a bunch of product that's just getting forced out onto the market, it's gonna decrease demand for other firms' products, because firm A is discounting this and that and getting everything sold. Firm B is going to be affected because people aren't going to want to buy their product as much because they can get it at firm A for a lot cheaper. And then the last one for competitive rivalry, high exit barriers. Exit barriers are referred to if you're in an industry and you want to leave that industry. If it's expensive to leave that industry, then you won't. For example, if you own a manufacturing plant and you've put millions, hundreds of $millions into this factory, and then you start to turn up negative numbers and you're not profitable. If you just walk away from that factory, that's like giving up another couple $100 million. So in a way, it's worth it just to scrape by and to not. You may be making negative numbers. You're probably making negative a couple thousand, but that's better than making negative couple million. So that the reason that affects competitive rivalry, you might have a bunch of firms that aren't profitable, that are still productive. They're not making money, but they can't leave. They've invested too much in it, so they're still making products that will lower the value of your product. Don't get too hung up on those. It's good to know each of them individually, but you don't need a vast, great knowledge of them. Just be able to recognize each of them. And I will say that the information around competitive rivalry is much more than the one around the other four. So if that was overwhelming, don't worry. It's not that big of a deal. Be able to recognize them. Like if I were to say high exit barriers, just have a general knowledge that it's expensive to leave an industry. We'll go over these other four now, and you'll see they'll be much simpler, much easier to understand. The next one is buyer power. Buyer power, let's see. The book lists two ways that a buyer, so actually let me explain this first. What a buyer is, a buyer and a supplier go hand in hand. If you're a supplier, then you're like Sam's Club or Costco or really most firms that you don't see. you sell to the buyers. The buyers are Walmart, the BYU bookstore. They're the places you really walk into and buy things from. Suppliers supply resources to the buyers. And I realize that's probably not a great example because I use Sam's Club and Costco. So that might confuse a lot of people because you do buy there. But their primary reason is not to sell to customers. That's why they always charge a membership. It's because you're not really supposed to be there. That they sell to Walmart. Anyway, that was way more information than needed to know. Suppliers sell to buyers, and then ideally, basically, you buy from the buyers. So how can a buyer have power then? If there's a supplier, then the supplier gets to name the price, and the buyer just has to follow. There's actually a few ways that a buyer can have power. The first one is the number or concentration of buyers. So let me draw out a quick example for you. You can see this right here. If you are Chex Mix, no wait, that's not an example I want to use. That's the one for the supplier. Let me back up. Buyer power, I mentioned this in a different video. Think about Walmart, I'm sorry. And I don't really need to. Okay, if you are a supplier for Walmart, Walmart's huge, like thousands of stores across the United States. You want them to be your buyer because you make money, obviously, when you buy things. So we'll put up here Sam's Club because they supply Walmart. Sam's Club isn't a great example because they're owned by the same people. But this is a general example. If you're a company, it's possible that Walmart sells a good percentage of your product. Can you see it? I wrote 60%. So let's pretend that you're a company that supplies Walmart and they buy 60% of your product. If Walmart then says, hey, you're charging us too much for these chairs. We want to pay $2 a chair rather than $3 a chair. You can't really say no. You don't really have power because if you tell Walmart, nah, no thanks, we'll just sell to somebody else, that's 60% of the sales that you just gave up. So if the buyers there's just a few very powerful buyers, they have a lot of power over the suppliers because they kind of call the shots around there. Another way that buyers have power is price sensitivity. This is another thing that there's a lot of little information. Don't get caught up on it. It's pretty self-explanatory, so just be able to recognize the different ones. The book lists 5. So if this is, let me write it up so you can see what I'm talking about as I talk about it. This is talking about buyer sensitivity. So if buyers are sensitive, they have a little bit of power in the exchange because if they're sensitive to prices, then suppliers kind of have to pay attention to that or they will lose those buyers. So the first one is if buyers are struggling financially, they're more likely to cut off a supplier and say, no, we're going to do it without you. We don't have enough money to continue to do business with you. When a product is a significant portion of buyers' costs, product is significant portions of buyers' costs. So if a buyer is spending 80% of its money of its production costs to one supplier, then that's a lot of money invested in that. They're going to be very cautious and very wary of how much money they're spending on that. Buyers purchase in larger volume. This is kind of the same thing. If you are buying 100,000 Hot Wheels cars from whoever makes Hot Wheels, and they bump your price up just 5 cents per Hot Wheels car, that translates into thousands of dollars. So you're going to be sensitive to that. Product doesn't affect buyers' performance very much. So this is kind of on the other side. Not that you care very much, but this is on the other side in terms of you're not highly sensitive in terms of you need the prices to be cheap. This is if the prices aren't cheap, you don't care because you don't really need them anyway. I hope that doesn't confuse you. If you look at it, it kind of makes sense. So if you're I don't know, we'll stick with the Hot Wheels example. If you're Hot Wheels and you buy just they used to have a little bit of rubber around the tires. I don't think they really do anymore. In fact, I don't think they did before. But regardless, let's say that Hot Wheels used to have rubber tires. And then the rubber company started saying, hey, we're going to start charging you a lot more. Then Hot Wheels is going to say, I don't care. It didn't affect the performance of our product very much, so we're just going to use plastic instead. So that's how a buyer could have power in that situation. And then product doesn't save buyers money. When things save people money, they're much more willing to spend money for it. So if you're buying insurance that has it covers up to like $50,000 or something, you're willing to spend a little bit more because it'll save you money. If it doesn't save you money, if you're paying $1,000 for an insurance package that only covers you for up to $2,000, then you're just gonna say, well, never mind, that's not worth it. That's not gonna save me money in the end. So those are the way buyers can have power. Supplier bargaining power is on the other end, and a lot of things kind of work the opposite. So you can think about. Anyway, let me give this example because I made up this example and I'm pretty proud of it. Imagine your Chex Mix. And you sell your cereal to Target, and you sell your cereal to Food Lion, and you sell your cereal to Giant and to, I don't know, Trader Joe's. Anyway, but you're the only people that do Chex Mix. Sure, there's a knockoff brand that Great Value does or whatever, but you're the suppliers for these ones. So in this case, you have all the power. If you tell the buyers, the people you supply for, hey, we're going to start charging $3 a box instead of $2, and Food Lion is like, I'm not paying that. That's way too much. Then you'll just say, well, I don't care. We supply a bunch of other people. We're not going to be losing any money if we lose your 3% of profit. So suppliers have power. There's few suppliers that have a lot of power or have a lot of market coverage. One thing I forgot to mention, going back to buyer power real quick. There are two terms that you should get confused. That's backward integration and forward integration. Backward integration, so let me draw this. If you're a supplier, you sell to a buyer. Forward integration means that the suppliers are going to move forward in the exchange process. And they're going to start doing what the buyers do. So if you're the supplier of Hot Wheels, we'll start with the buyer because that's what we did first. If you're the buyer for the rubber of Hot Wheels cars and they start to charge too much, if it's credible that you're going to say, okay, but we'll just start making our own rubber, that gives you power in the exchange. Because the suppliers obviously don't want you to do that. They'll lose money if you start doing it yourself. And then the same goes the other way. If buyers think you're going to move it to their market, then that gives you, as the supplier, power. I think I explained that pretty well. Okay, and then one of the other ones, where'd it go? Threat of new entrants. This would also play a role in affecting how the industry works. Let's see, what did I write down for this one? Okay, so firms that are new, we call them incumbent firms. Incumbent firms are new to the industry. Incumbent firms, when they move into an industry, they need to make money. They've invested time, they've invested money, resources. If they don't start they can't not turn a profit for very long. That being said, they're very willing to very eager, I should say, to get to get a portion of the market, to gain a market share. So if you were to decide you wanted to start making a soft drink to sell nationally, there's only you make plants, you hire employees, you start production, you buy all the resources and the ingredients. That costs millions of dollars. You can't go very long not making a profit. So you might sell your drink very cheap because you need customers, you need cash flow. That would affect all the other companies because now there's a cheaper product that you're not stopping at anything to get into people's homes. So it just makes it so there's more product in an eager company for sales. Right along with that is the lower prices that incumbent firms usually charge a lower price. They don't get to charge a premium because they haven't made a name for themselves that they could charge a premium and be profitable. So that being said, the book talks a little about barriers to entry. So if you're in an industry, you would want to do all you can to stop new entrants. You wouldn't want new entrants to come in. I drew a little dotted line to represent like a barrier. I'll make it thicker. All right, it's a little barrier. You would want to stop new entrants from coming in because they'll steal your market, they'll steal your money. So there's a few ways in the book list. I'm just going to list them real quick. How industries try to create barriers of entrance to new entrants. The first one is economies of scale. Incumbent firms can't afford big, expensive machinery, so they can't keep up. It says other cost advantage. So these are things like you patent your manufacturing processes, you patent your recipes, so no firms can come in and start to try to do the same thing. It also lists the economies of scope. So you'll learn about that in chapter 5. I think I'm giving too much information in this one. Capital requirements. It's expensive to catch up to if you're trying to start a new soft drink, it's expensive to get where Coca-Cola is. So that's a barrier to prevent new entrants. Networking effects. Network effects is when the more people that use your product, the more people encouraged to use your product. So think about Facebook. If one person used Facebook, he would hate it. It would be useless. But if 100 million people are using Facebook, then they get to talk to 100 million other people, and so network effects is like it's easier to hold the market when more people use your product. So if you're new, it would be harder to get more people to use your product. And then government policy. Sometimes governments put they require you to have insurance, or they require you to pay for licensing, and that's a barrier to entry. It prevents people from coming in. So barriers to entry, it helps hold industry attractiveness so people don't come in and take over. And then the last one is substitutes. This is simple. If you're selling butter, you have to be very wary of margarine because people are likely to substitute your product for another one. There's substitutes. The book says they're fundamentally different, but they serve the same purpose. So butter or margarine is different from butter, but it serves the same purpose. So the book lists two reasons, or two ways, two signs that you have to be worried about something being a substitute. So that's awareness and availability. If a lot of people know about margarine, then it's likely they'll substitute your butter for theirs. On the flip side, if you sell butter and a lot of people don't know about margarine, then you'd be in a better situation. Also, price and performance. If margarine is a lot cheaper, people might start substituting that for your butter. Also, if it works just as well, then people are likely to substitute their margarine into your butter. Okay, and then the last one, like I mentioned before, I'm sorry, this one went way longer than I meant for it to. There's just a lot of little tiny details that it's easy to get caught up on, like I just did. This is the general environment, so let me erase this so this doesn't confuse you. This is specific to an industry. An industry has each of those. These ones are the general environment. So these are things not just specific to an industry, but that all industries have to deal with. So not only does, so with the thing that was up here before, each industry would have their own 5 forces, but all industries together have to deal with these. And these are things with the, well, let me start, global effects. So things like trade and exchange rates and outsourcing. Those are things, however those are working, however they're going, play roles in your market. So for example, if you work in a human, what's that called? You work in like a telemarketing? It's the people that you call when you have a problem with your laptop. Like IT people. Anyway, if everybody, if people start to, maybe I should write them up so you can see. Global is the first one. If a lot of people are starting to move their companies overseas, then that's going to affect everyone else. Well, in a variety of ways. Obviously, it'll bring down the amount of jobs. It'll bring it up somewhere else, but it'll hurt the environment in some ways. You can make the argument that it helps, but in either way, it changes it. Ecological. So this is especially important when it comes to how do people think that you are doing with the environment. So if people think that steel manufacturers are killing the environment, then that'll affect many other industries, not just steel. That'll affect the people who buy steel. That'll affect the people who sell to steel. That'll affect the people that buy just a little bit of steel because they're going to make a Hot Wheels car. So if a lot of people think that steel is a big pollutant, the ecological effects would affect the environment. Demographic. Again, this one's exactly what it sounds like. Demographic, it always is. If the market's changing, if all the young people are growing up, then they're not going to be as interested in your My Little Pony products. Economic. This is self-explanatory. If the economy is down, people don't have much money to buy, so they can't buy as much on all products. On the flip side of that, if the economy is doing great, then a lot of people would have a lot more discretionary income that they can sell. I'm sorry, this one includes exchange rates. I had mentioned it under global, but it's actually listed here. Technological. Don't think of this as like specifically computers or things like that, but this comes from the fact that people are always trying to do things faster and more efficiently. So even if you do something like you stitch baseballs, you're constantly looking for a way to do it faster, more effectively. Maybe it's a sharper needle, maybe it's a different thread. So this isn't just computers. This is just always trying to do things faster, more efficiently. Can you see down to the end? Complementary products. If you are a lot of products are worth more when they go together. For example, if you were to sell a Xbox, it would be worth, we'll say $100. I don't know if that's accurate. If you were to sell an Xbox, it'd be worth $100. If you were to sell an Xbox controller, it would be worth $15. But if you sell them together, it's not worth $115. It would be worth more because they're used together. So if in a lot of industries, how products that are complementary to yours, how they're performing, affects how you're performing. This one, they call it regulatory. They call it regulatory / political / legal. So this is how the government, what the roles they're playing and how that affects the general environment. For example, in the book talks about during the Great Recession, banks were encouraged just a few years ago. The banks were encouraged to hold on to money so that when people failed to make payments on mortgages, they wouldn't go broke. That's what happened. That's what caused the Great Recession. There's a big, long explanation of it, but I'll just say people failing to be able to pay, people not being able to make mortgages hurt a bunch of people and bottomed out the banks. So the government started to require banks to hold a certain amount of money so that if people failed to make mortgage payments, the banks wouldn't go broke. They'd be able to still pay that money. But either way, the point of that is the government can affect the general environment. And then the last one is social. So this is things like what nations value, what the norm, what's important to them. If you sell, I'm trying to think of something simple real quick. If you sell like baby furniture, and suddenly people aren't as interested in, actually this is too specific to, anyway, we'll say for the whole baby market, if people aren't as interested in having babies suddenly, the social effects have changed, then that's going to affect the whole market. People are going to be less interested in buying that product. Anyway, that wasn't a great example, but you can see how people changing what they find important would affect the whole environment. So let me see if I missed anything. I'm sorry, that went way longer than I meant for it to, but okay. Analyze the external environment, opportunities, threats. Okay, all ended there. I think I covered all of them. Let me say one more time. Don't get caught up on specifics. Be able to recognize things, like understand what the ecological effects would be on the general environment, but you don't have to get caught up on specifics of it. So I'm going to pause this and then I'll make chapter 1 for you.